Or are you kind of in between? How many go with concerned? Raise your hand. I'm a teacher too, so I got to get interaction. All right. How many go with concerned? All right. How many are excited? All right. How many have that mixed feeling of, I'm excited, but I'm kind of concerned? All right. Well, the Pew Research shows that from 21 to 23, the number of people who are more concerned has grown. Okay. A lot of that was probably when ChatGPT came out and people went, huh? Okay. If you actually think about it, AI has been around for a very long time. When I teach AI at Hardin-Simmons, one of the things that I start with is, do you think a calculator is intelligent? And the students go, no. And I'm like, all right, multiply 347,000 times 283. Go. And they're like, it might be intelligent. Right? It's that we don't really have this idea of intelligence, and often what research has shown is that intelligence is often, or artificial intelligence is often labeled as the thing that a computer can do that I can't, right? And as computers get better, those things are increasing, all right? Let's take AI in healthcare, all right? Your good old health status. Are you comfortable with AI in healthcare? How many go with yes? How many go with no? Some in between, all right? Do you think an AI would lead to better, worse, or no difference in outcomes if AI was used in healthcare? How many think it would be better? How many think it would be worse? Some? No difference? Okay. It's ironic that y'all said that you think it would be better, but you didn't want it in there. All right? Yeah, it'll help diagnose better, but I don't know. The research really shows actually most people are uncomfortable with it in AI, though AI has been in healthcare for quite a while. I read an article about 8 years ago where it was using AI in predicting cancer off of X-ray and MRI scans. And it found that the AI was about 80 to 85% accurate. The doctor was about 88 to 93% accurate. But what they really learned was if the doctor and the AI both had a vote, it became 98% accurate. Because AI could find certain forms that were hard for the human and vice versa. So, more into business, with AI in the Pew Research, they did the survey, and this I think was at the end of 22, first part of 23 on this one. So this was kind of right as ChatGPT kind of really came out, okay? And so the first question that it asked, now note, it really got the not sure's grade out. All right. So about a third of them, everybody was like, I don't know. All right. Sounds like about my class and students, right? What's the answer? I don't know. Okay. So got about a third of those, but the first question asked was, what about using AI in making a hiring decision, the final hiring decision? Where would you stand? Everybody's like, nope. That's where most people stood, about 71%. Okay. What about just reviewing the job applicants? Yeah. So you have no problem tossing somebody out ahead of time, but you don't want the AI to do it at the end. You have to think through some of these that often we want the AI to do what? The hard part, but that's probably the part we might need to be more involved in. Okay? Monitoring and evaluations. Most people did not want AI tracking workers' movements while they were at work. Seems fitting, right? However, most people are okay. Only 34% weren't for AI to monitor their driving when they were driving for the company. Okay. I guess it's not listening to the radio or anything else. I don't know. So this shows what I've seen is we have a tendency to really want AI to help us out, but we don't always think about the implications long term. Okay? So what is ChatGPT? I'm assuming by now most people have heard of ChatGPT. Raise your hand if you have. All right? That way the people who don't feel ostracized by not raising their hand. All right? Really, when we say ChatGPT, it's like calling all of your tissues Kleenexes or all the sodas Coke. ChatGPT is really the name of a specific AI owned by OpenAI. Okay? So most people realize that. I just want to make sure I throw that out there. You have other AIs out there. There's 1,000 of them now. We can even create our own in-house, things along those lines. Really what the term is often used is what is called generative AI. Now, generative AI is a newer concept of AI compared to what we would traditionally know as AI. Generative AI builds or generates based on historical information and probability, okay? One thing that freaks most people out is you assume that the machine is thinking. It is not. It is computing. It's why we call it a computer. Okay? It's just really good at math. Well, we're not. And so what it's actually doing is using what is called reinforcement learning, okay, so that it iterates, I would say thousands, it's more like millions of times, going, here's what I'm going to do. Did you like it? No. All right. What about this one? No. All right. What about this one? Nope. All right. What about this one? Nope. All right. Oh, I found one you liked. Okay. Let's try it again. And it does that over and over to build these what are called neural network pathways, these connections to say, when this is the input, this is what could be an output. Note, I didn't say this is what is the output, it's what could be. Because part of this is variability to support what is called conversational. If there is a given output for every specific input, then it's not conversational. And what that means is if I ask you a question, it's kind of like if I say, hey, how are you? You say, most people say good. Every now and then you get the person who says what? What was that? Here, good, living the dream, whatever it might be, right? Why? That's conversational. If everybody said the exact same thing, it wouldn't be conversational. So one of the ways generative AI does this is it bases it on probability. And it says, what's the most probable next word, character, sequence? Okay, we could go with that. Or what are the top 5? Let me randomly pick one. How did that go? Okay, and so it's building this on how one word forms into the sentence of the next. Take, for example, anybody use Grammarly for writing? I'm doing this whole dissertation thing, which just about, I kid you not, 30 minutes ago, they called me doctor. I actually finally defended my dissertation. Woohoo! With that, I had a lot of Grammarly help. I'm not a good writer, right? And so why does Grammarly work? It's actually not going back to an English professor saying, what's the grammatical rule in this? It's literally just going looking at hundreds of text and saying, when I have this word followed by this word, they thought that was right, so I'm going to keep that up. And so if I don't see that combination, I'm going to tell somebody it's wrong. And that's the basic premise of Grammarly. It just has a massive database to do that. Why? Because you don't put a singular noun in front of a plural verb, because that would be deemed wrong. So statistically, when it looks through all its research, it doesn't see it, so when it sees it in your writing, it says, that's wrong. That's all that the Grammarly, that AI is really doing on some of those. When we talk about generative AI, though, we often, like I have been, talk about text. It's why we talk about ChatGPT. Generative AI is not limited to text. There is generative AI for images. Midjourney is a common one. DALL-E is OpenAI's. You can just say, hey, DALL-E, paint me a West Texas sunset with a roadrunner standing on a barbed wire fence with a cactus in the background, and it'll pop it out. And considering I have trouble drawing stick figures, I like that. There's also generative music. There is a whole genre now of AI-generated music. Why? Because, just like text, a sound is a sequence. A music is a sequence of sounds, and it just says, oh, listen to enough Taylor Swift song, I'll write a Taylor Swift song, right? If you have a large enough database, you can do so. Why somebody would do that, I still don't know, but I'm sure somebody's trying. So how do we use AI personally? Let me give you 4 general areas. The first, to understand a topic, all right? This is very helpful and probably the most common use that I would say when you're having trouble understanding something, especially if you're taking on a new job or something along those lines, ask ChatGPT. Why? It can explain a lot of stuff for you, right? Hey, I did this time and time again while I was working on my dissertation. When I'm working through this, what's the statistical method that I should use in this case? And plop, it would print something out. And I'm like, that's great. Can you explain what that means? Right? And then it would, almost like a tutor, utilize ChatGPT with this conversational piece. All right? Brainstorming. You will get stuck at some point in life if you haven't already. When you are, go ask, right? Often we turn to our friends, our colleagues, and say, hey, I need help coming up with whatever. Turn to ChatGPT, turn to Claude. No, Claude is another one. Gemini is made by Google. So those are kind of the three that are big, at least right now. Give it another few weeks and somebody else will be in the mix. All right? So when you're stuck coming up with an idea, when you're stuck coming up with a name for something, when you're stuck coming up with whatever, you can use it to do that, right? Most of this, you're like, I'm already doing some of that. That's great. Building. Why would you ever write your own first draft anymore? I saw an article once in which a hiring manager basically said, if the cover letter wasn't written by ChatGPT, don't apply. If you're not going to use the technology out there to make yourself better, why would I want to hire you? That was his mentality. Whether to try it or not, I'll let you decide. But you have access to this tool. Why are you taking the time to write all this out? I'm a computer scientist. I write a lot of code. There's a specific one called GitHub Copilot that I literally was like, all right, let's just see how good this thing is. I said, I want you to write a method that does this. Boom, it was done. It would have taken me at least 2 minutes to write it. It was done in half a second. Next method, done. Next method, done. I had a fully functional program in 5 minutes. Doing stuff that seniors in college should be doing, right? Why? Because access to these tools provide those things. When we're building things, whether it's code, images, papers, essays, memos, whatever they may be, do that. A lot of AI now, one that I've used called Crisp, you can attach to Zoom. And so as I'm Zooming, it will, one, clarify the background noise. So when I'm sitting at front porch drinking my coffee, they're not hearing everything in the background. And two, it will notate everything so that when I'm done, I just say, what are my follow-ups? What's the summary? And it will summarize the entire meeting for me, tell me my follow-ups, and tell me what I need to do next. And I don't have to think about it. I just have to do what? Have my conversation, have my meeting. Why? Because I'm horrible at taking notes. Why not use AI to help build all that for me? Finally, the flip of that, polishing it up. This is the one that will drive me crazy with my students. Why didn't you proofread? More than that, why didn't you have ChatGPT proofread it for you? Right? It can do that for you. You can give it the text and say, hey, did I make any mistakes? I even decided, hey, let me write an email to somebody, copied it, put it in ChatGPT. Does this make any sense? Literally was the only question I asked was, did this make any sense? Pasted the email, and it said, yeah, it makes sense. Here's what you're communicating. And it listed out bullet points of what I was communicating. And then it said, and you might consider adding the following. Clarify the timeline on what you expect whenever you said this. Polish on how you're going to measure this outcome. And it gave me points to expand and expound on that, right? Had my draft. I literally wrote the email in about 2 minutes, 3-4 sentences. It wasn't a long email. Threw it in there. Now I have a lot better thing to send to somebody. The other question I have for you is, how are you going to use generative AI corporately? We often think of how I'm going to benefit it because why? We don't like to work, so if we can do it for us, we're going to do that, right? I tell my students, Bill Gates had a quote. Bill Gates' quote was, he hires the laziest people he can find because they find the most efficient way to get things done, right? I tell my students they can be lazy as long as they know what they're doing so they can get things done, all right? How does it benefit the company? Can you increase your efficiency, right? If you're spending all your time proofing emails, coming up with ideas, can it speed up that workflow? One, it benefits the company that way. The other question we have, and this is the one that gets really sensitive to a lot of people, is will it replace people's jobs? I'm going to say yes. And if you're a good manager, it should replace some of your people, not in the sense that you let them go, but you repurpose them, right? I'm not promoting that AI is going to take out the workforce. I'm promoting the fact that AI will change how jobs work, Therefore, we need to adapt as well. There's a book called, I can see it in my head, Humans Need Not Apply. And it's written by an economist in which he basically makes the statement about AI. Note, he wrote this over 15 years ago. And one of his points was this. There was a letter from the Department of Labor to the president at the time that said, hey, we have to worry about this technology replacing our workforce. We might have a workforce where we're 90% unemployed. We need to consider that's a possibility. That president was LBJ. That's how long this has been a problem. The question becomes, how fast do humans react to how fast the technology takes our jobs? From a corporate standpoint, if you're going to use ChatGPT or you allow your employees to, consider certain risk. Who has access to that data, right? Private intellectual property concerns, okay? If you go to ChatGPT and you're not paying attention, technically they can use it to train their data and train their other models. So therefore, you have to consider how that's going to impact what you allow them to do, right? This was one of the big things on the software development side, because you have a lot of people where software development is all about IP, all about intellectual property, right? And so if I allow GitHub Copilot to see my code, that's problematic. So how did they get around it? They had different ones. Also, where did the response come from? Note, there are terms called hallucination. Does anybody know what a hallucination from ChatGPT is? It literally just makes stuff up. Why? Because it's not rationalizing and reasoning like you did. One of the things I asked at one time was, hey, can you give me an article? There again, I'm doing my research about this topic. It said, sure. Here's an article written by these two people, published in this journal, on this month, on this day. Said, great, thanks. Can you give me a summary of it? It gave me the abstract and summary. I'm like, this is awesome. Why am I researching any other way? And then I went to find the article. It didn't exist. So I go back to ChatGPT and said, hey, I'm having trouble finding that article. Can you send me a link? And it said, oh, sorry about that. I made that up. Here's another one. At least it said it was sorry. Just straight up made one up. My estimate was, at least at the time, and this was about 9 months ago, it was half time it just made stuff up whenever I would ask about certain articles. So there again, validate what you have, okay? Where's it going? This is kind of where I want to spend most of my time and then leave time for questions. One of the things that I think we have to consider is, where is AI going from a corporate perspective, such as marketing? Take, for example, I'm a new college student moving from Dallas over to Abilene to go to one of the universities. And I'm like, hey, I need to open a bank account. I'm not going to go to Google anymore. Where am I going? ChatGPT. Or now Bing, if you use Bing, is really just ChatGPT. And I ask, hey, I'm moving to Abilene. What bank do I use? If you work for a bank, do you want yours to show up there? Probably. So how do you get it in there? We all talk about SEO for search engine optimization, but it's about to get shifted to how do you optimize for all the different chat platforms? How do you optimize for Gemini? How do you optimize for Claude or ChatGPT? I'm looking at universities. You got, what, 4 of them in town? How many are in the state? Which one should I go to? You don't think some student, high school student's not going to ask that to ChatGPT? It was writing all their homework for them. Gut feeling says that's what they're going to do to figure out where they're going to go next, right? If you're working for a company, how do you get your information in there? Part of that is learning how what the fun fancy term is the LLM, the large language model. This is what they're all built on. How does that work? How do you train one? Currently, right now, our senior project for Hardin Simmons, they're doing their presentation next week, is working with our admission staff to basically build an internal chatbot on an LLM for the university. Why? Because to me, this is where the future of things are going. How many of y'all have gone to like the help support of whatever company it is, and you click on it, and it's like, here, talk to the chatbot, and you're like, sure, here's my question. I don't understand that. Pick one of the 4. Right? Why? That is what is called a rule-based AI approach. It needs to know in a decision tree which way to go. LLMs, large language models, now allow you to type whatever you want and it to be trained on that. So what our students have had to do is basically scrape all of Hardin Simmons websites, gather all that data, feed it into an LLM, train it, and train it, and train it to try and get it to come back with the right answer. Understanding how what is called training and fine-tuning are going to be keys to this area. And so as they do that, this is where that train fine-tuning on the internals. If you understand that, back to that risk, this is how a hacker thinks. Can be a risk, or it could be an exploit. Oh, if I want them to use all my data to train their model, feed it in. So why not use ChatGPT and tell it exactly which the best university in town is going to be, what the best bank is. When it gives me one back that says, you should use this bank. No, I don't like that because blah, blah, blah. Why? It's not a rational being. It just goes, oh, it's back to reinforcement learning. I had a bad outcome. They said they didn't like that response. Lower the percentage, I'd use that one again. This is the good and the bad of AI, because at the same time, as that happens, and we see this time and time again through different ones, AIs then have hallucinations where they make stuff up, and then inaccuracies where they just say the wrong thing, right? And now, actually, ChatGPT is becoming more and more wrong on some of these. My favorite was I have a buddy doing some computer science work, and there's something called a binary search tree. Brief data structure lesson. Start at the top. If it's less than the number at the top, you go to the left. If it's greater than, you go to the right. That's how a search tree works. He said, hey, I need help creating a binary search tree. Can you help me with these numbers? And it said, sure. Since 45 is greater than 91, you would put it over here. And he's like, hold on 1 second. It missed the basic math of which number is larger than the other. Why? Because it did not view them as numbers. It viewed them as characters, as words, as strings of text, and it put it out of context. The other thing that this is known as in AI is the problem with the elephant in the room. Not the social thing that we think of. It came from the term where early in generations of AI, as they were training on images, they would give it pictures of like the African safari. And it was great. Here's the hippo. Here's the giraffe. Here's the elephant. Good job. Then they'd give it a picture of the living room. Here's the couch. Here's the lamp. Here's the table. And it worked great until you put that statue of the elephant in the living room. And then your sofa became a hippo. And your lamp became the giraffe because it didn't know the context. So, are we at the point where I would trust AI? No. Will I trust it enough to help me along? Yes, but I will validate. This is no different, and this is part of where, at least from an educator, I have to come in and teach my students. It's never changed in education, right? The point of education is shaping how you think. And because of that, now we just have quicker access to it. We really have to think about that. So, let's do this one more. There we go. So, I ran through that a lot. I gave a brief, or I say a very brief, I gave an overview at a high level because I also want to leave times for questions. Okay? So, let's just open up. Are there any general questions? And as I answer questions, I will get into the weeds of being a nerd and talking all about the LLMs and the data analytics and everything else, if you would like me to. But some of y'all look at me like, he talked about math. I'm getting hot and sweaty right now. No. Okay? Any questions? No. All right. Right over here. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I think that has to come down to, one, the risk of being wrong, right? And so what's the risk of being wrong if I do it and I'm wrong versus if the ChatGPT does it and it's wrong? Because a case in point, and ChatGPT is going to be no different probably, around a lot of the automated resume systems, I have seen people, you basically highlight the job posting, copy it, paste it on your resume, turn the font white, make it really small, hide it, but the reader will read it, but the human won't see it, right? So I can tell you lots of ways to get around stuff. I just have to tell you to be ethical and legal, okay? That's what I have to tell my students too. So I would say, would I use it to maybe help prioritize? Yes. Would I use it to eliminate somebody? Probably not, right? Because it might be at the bottom, and hopefully as I'm going through it, because it helps you validate, right? That, hey, this is the order that this put it in. Okay, is that the way I would have done so? And if it is, then I can give it more trust, right? But if it's not, then I don't know if not necessarily distrust it, but I need to make sure I'm more cautious about just taking it at face value. And so the other problem that there will be is there is tendency to be a bias that once you see it in order, you will assume the top one's better, right? And so you have to be cognizant of that. So the other thing I would suggest is actually use more than one AI. Often what I've seen is students or people, typically students, just go to one and then they get that. Had you gone to a different one, you might get a different result. But if you look at, hey, if both of them put them both at the same one at top, that might be indicating that it's better. So I would use it to prioritize, but I would not use it to eliminate somebody per se for a job or for admission to a university. Great. Other questions? Yes.
My question is about, you talk about ways that companies are like, hey, we don't want AI to get the system. And my question is more like the art field,
Mm-hmm.
and the art field is really big on, hey, these are my artwork that is being thrown in to the system, that they actually use. So when you use other ways where you can make art and put it online, that the AI really has
The ethical person in me says, yes, there are proper ways to do that. The hacker in me says, no. Why? If it's on my screen, I can capture it, I can replicate it. I even at one point replicated an entire song by taking it in a headphone jack, pulling it out of putting basically a 3.5 millimeter out of my headphone into my recorder, hit play, hit record at the same time, and it records the whole thing for me. No, I was, in high school and didn't know how to rip CDs at the point yet, so figured it out though, right? Headphone jack. For those that don't know, back in the day, we had to actually plug stuff in. All right. So from the art perspective, there are ways now, but you're going to have to go with the legal route, right? Because it is your intellectual property. It is yours. You have it copyrighted. So therefore, others shouldn't use it. How to technically stop them? There are some methodologies, but it is very hard to do it from a technical standpoint. Certain websites are more prone to letting things slip and having access versus others. So being cognizant of what those are can be very beneficial to that. Does that help out? I know it's not probably the answer you wanted because I just told you I could rip everything that you created, but it's the idea that with that, there are legal, and a lot of this also stems from how we teach our kids about the ethics of what is copyright and why it's important that we value the artist and we value other people's creation, because that is what the money, from a software developer, yeah, everybody wants to have all your software for free. Nobody likes to pay for Microsoft Office and all the other stuff, right? But somebody spent time writing the code, making it work, doing those things, in the same way an artist spent time drawing the picture, creating the sculpture, whatever it might be. And we have to make sure that our culture and our community value those things and understand the ethical implications of that, not just, it's easy for me, I'll just do it that way, right? So I think this is a solution that needs more legal and policy governance more than it can be from a technology governance. Yes? For which one? It depends on what I'm doing. So if I'm coding, it's Copilot, because that's the one I go to for that. It's built into my IDE, so I don't even have to think about it. I have ChatGPT. If I don't like what that says, I go over to Gemini. If I don't like what that says, I go over to Claude. And then if I don't like what that says, I probably need to rethink what question I'm asking. So to me, I vary between them, mainly just to see what they will say in different scenarios. There's lots of them out there. I even have one running on my own local machine just to see what it can do and how good it can train on things that I do, right? That make it actually respond more like me. Take all the papers I've written through all my academic stuff, take all that, feed it in so it knows how I write. So whenever it needs a response, it comes back more like my writing than the ChatGPT, so that whenever I turn it in, they don't get caught that I use ChatGPT to turn it in. Like I said, I find ways around the system. People get scared. I was talking to a colleague, and she was like, I have a student doing this. I'm like, here's what they're doing. Here's how they're cheating. And she was like, how did you know? And I'm like, it's what I would have done. And she's like, well, I don't even think that way. And I'm like, when you write enough code and you have to secure things enough, you will start finding every loophole you can and know how to exploit it. And so you have to, part of it is you have to start thinking that way, especially as technology advances, because legal will always be behind technology. You will never have laws in place to handle the technology that is emerging. And so you have to make sure you understand how that's going to impact businesses and the things around you. Other questions? Yes.
I don't really have questions, but just a suggestion for services like
Poe.
Poe.
Okay.
Selection of pretty much every LLM that is out there.
Mm-hmm. I was about to say, there's a lot. People are having bots that aggregate bots that aggregate specific bots. There's one now that's specific for, at least from a programming standpoint, every programming language has its own bot specific to it. I heard she's the vice president of Google's data and analytics in charge of Gemini. Heard her on a podcast where she said the future of programming, the future language is English. Because then you just type in what you want in English and have it spit it out. And as a computer science professor, that's somewhat concerning because I don't like English. And two, understanding the value of what really is getting created, because I would argue even with Copilot, it gets code that works, but it's not the most efficient. It's not the best. If you understand the code, you can make it better. And so that's where the value add really comes. Just the same way with it writes a memo, but if you're really good at communication, you could polish that and make it better. That's where your value comes in. That's where the human value comes in, is really understanding other humans, right? And so with the bots aggregating other bots, yeah, you can. Is there going to be one bot that rules them all? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to go with Skynet here. We still have access to the power cord, so we're still good. That question usually comes up too, so. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Personally, yes, because I have no idea how to interpret law. So the risk of having it, now, once I get something back, I'm going to find somebody I trust to validate it. But at the same time, the lawyer just validating what I think is right is going to be a lot less billable hours than it is to read through the whole thing. So from that standpoint, I would at least start with it. I don't think it'll be my final product, but I would start with it. There again, asking it. The other part of is what's called prompt engineering. How you ask the question makes a huge difference, right? And so in a situation, if it was especially legal where I had a lot of questions pertaining to it, I would ask it a lot of different things to see if it maintains consistency and to go from there. Legal aids was actually one of the top things that ChatGPT was expected to replace because it could process law fairly quickly. There was I don't have it on this slide deck. There's a infographic that came out from ChatGPT that listed basically where it scored on different standardized tests and things along those lines. And like on the GRE, the LSAT, a lot of those standardized tests, it was in the top 90, 95 percentile type thing. However, the high school AP literature exam, it was in the bottom 5%. Same with AP computer science. And the reason why is all the other ones, all those standardized tests have tons of training material, tons of repeatable questions that they're looking for a known answer. When you get to the literature and computer science, those are really based off brand new things that don't have historical context for the LLM. So it doesn't know how to create anything. And so that's where we really need to, from a computer science standpoint, how do we make that better? From a human standpoint, how do we make sure that's where we're adding our value in and not necessarily wasting our time on some of these? One case in point, one of the best examples I've heard on in education especially, why having ChatGPT write the essay, right? You have a 5-page essay. Oh, ChatGPT, write it for me. Why that's so detrimental isn't necessarily the fact that they just got out of the work. And it's not even the fact that they didn't learn anything. Because if they actually read through it, they had to have learned something because they saw words, right? The detrimental part is the fact that they never learned to process what not to include, right? And this is one of the things that I see with my daughter. I have a 12-year-old. My daughter and some of her friends is everything's good, right? We live in a society now where we're not often bound by limitations from a storage standpoint. I still remember as a kid, I wanted to put a golf game on my family computer, and my mom told me no, and I asked why, and she said, it takes 12 floppy disks. Note, a floppy disk holds 1.44 megabytes. So the game was about 15 meg. That's about the size of one picture on your iPhone, give or take. Right? Back then, we were bound by this finite space that now technically is still bound from a computational standpoint, but it's hard for our heads to wrap around the exponential growth that it has, and the younger generation is even struggling some with it too. My daughter, I'm going to pick on her, even though this is recorded, and hopefully she'll never see it. I have Alexa at my house, and so my wife loves lamps, and so we have lamps all through the house. So what do we say? Alexa, turn on the lamps. Lamps come on. Alexa, turn off the lamps. Lamps go off. We moved one of the lamps into my daughter's room. She walked in there and was like, how do I turn this on? It's like, push the button. Why? Because she had grown up turning on and off the lamps with Alexa pretty much her whole life, right? And so my daughter's smart. She's great. It's just one of those that it's like, stop and think about it 2 seconds, and she would have figured it out. She just didn't want to, which is the other problem. They don't want to stop to think, because why? Hey, Siri, what's the answer to this? Hey, Google, what's the answer to this? Alexa, do this. ChatGPT, write this. They're not having to think, right? So this is one of the problems that we're going to have to deal with as they get older. And I'm seeing it even in some of my younger college students. They don't have to think, so what are they going to do when they get to the workforce? And you tell them, hey, can you go do this? If ChatGPT can't do it for them, they might be back to you asking how to help, right? So thinking through some of that is going to be an issue too. Do you have a question? So I'll head over here. All right. Other questions? I can stay up here all day, and also I teach computer science. Awkward silences don't bother me at all. I work with awkward students all the time, so I can handle it. All righty. To start, I would go to openai.com to play with ChatGPT. Unless you have a Google account and you're good with Google, then go to Gemini and search Gemini from Google. Those are probably two of the front runners that I would say, depending on which analytic and which metric you're using, are the two top ones for now. And so go to either one of those. Both have free accounts that you can sign up for. So you can sign up for an account. You can just type chat.openai.com and it'll take you right to ChatGPT. Sign in, and you just start asking questions, and it will start answering it for you. And so I was going to do possibly a live demo, but I never trust Wi-Fi on presentations like this, and so I didn't want to have that, stand up here. Well, I was going to do this, and it's not working. So, but yeah, if you'll go to ChatGPT or Google, either one, and check one of those out, it will be able to start answering questions for you from the get-go. There's plugins to like OpenAI's ChatGPT where you can upload PDFs and other documents. And so it's really nice. There's one chat PDF. You can basically upload all your PDFs. It'll parse through them and then answer questions about your PDFs for you. It's really great when you're researching and you find a bunch of articles and you don't want to have to read them. It'll summarize them. Doesn't take me, basically it helps me go, oh, that one's a good one to go back and actually read versus this other one where it wasn't as valuable as I thought. Prompt chaining. Putting one prompt after another. Chain them together. Fancy way. Prompt chaining really is, at a high level, that's really what it is, right? Just putting one after the other. It's how, given the context, when I give it a prompt, ChatGPT gives me an answer, how do I actually give it a second prompt to make the best result that I come in there? Now, I say that because you also have to think are you talking from a user perspective or an API perspective? Because if you'll learn to code, you can do this all behind the scenes where it will automate it all for you. And you can have basically one bot chatting with another bot to get the best result, and it'll do it for you. And so I think that's actually where it's going. I don't think prompt engineer, I actually saw job postings for prompt engineers. I don't think those are going to last long because I think one bot will be able to train another bot because they've done that previously. And so we're going to see an automated process in which one AI will actually augment to the other AI. This is how they train some of when they were doing open AIs, this is how they train some of them is, here's a list of all the prompts, here's an expected result. If it's not in there, and they gave them those to train on, and then they had a subset where it said, okay, now ask, if it doesn't give this answer, then tell it bad feedback. And that's how they would retrain some of it. So did that somewhat answer your question, or do you want me to go into more detail? All righty. Other questions? The other thing I don't know is exactly how much time I'm supposed to stand up here and talk. Does anybody have the schedule? At 3:30? That's pretty good. Any other questions just because? He's the guy who said yes. Mm-hmm. The paid version will just give you access to the newer version, and I have a feeling it'll be continual newer versions of what OpenAI develops. If you have the finances for it, yes, because it'll allow a larger, what's called a token window of how much text you can put in the prompt and those kind of things. It's a better trained engine or LLM. And so I would say if you have the finances for it, yes. If you don't have the finances for it, no. Right? Because you'll still get decent results with the other ones, but will you get better results and quicker time? Yes. The other reason is technically OpenAI will suspend free ones before they suspend paid accounts, meaning if the server does get overloaded like it did early on in 2022, you won't have access to it. So, did you have a question? Yes, I wouldn't trust it at all. Mainly because it's basically, here's the other part with stock markets and those kind of things. Since it's fluctuating based on how people are buying and selling, and it tells everybody to buy one thing, it knows everybody's about to buy something, so it can go the other way. So I took a class on high frequency machine learning algorithms and trading, and that was one of the things that we learned is there was what was called, I forgot what year it was, the flash crash, where basically high frequency traders, all of a sudden, all those bots got in somebody, I forgot who it was, decided they were going to sell like a third of their portfolio, which dropped part of the market. All the bots saw it starting to sell, so they all started to sell, which caused the other bots to sell, which basically dropped, I think it was $3 trillion worth of value in under 6 seconds. They had to literally stop the stock market, wait 30 seconds, turn it back on, and everything went back to normal. And about, I think it was $2.5 trillion of it came back. Yes. Yeah, so there's a lot of variance in there. And also when you say Gemini, that's like the big broad platform. There's Gemini Ultra, Gemini Pro, Gemini, and the different windows and token sets in between. If you get into it and you find a great use for it and it becomes part of your daily workflow, pay for it. Then it's worth it, right? If it's not part of your daily workflow, then you may not consider paying for it. That might be part of your other question, Todd, is if it's part of, if all of a sudden you realize I am way more efficient with this, that time is valuable, that might be worth paying for it. Other questions? All right. Oh, one more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sky's the limit. You can do tons of things. I think this is actually, if you're an entrepreneur, this is a great market to get into, right? Where is AI going to be utilized? Universities. All the universities in our town pretty much have a limited number of admission staff. being able to answer all the questions that come in makes a big difference. So having a model that would do that, because if you look at the for-profit institutions like your Southern New Hampshire's, your Western Governors, they have hundreds of admission counselors that are on call 24/7, so that whenever you put in an application, it is no longer than 15 minutes before your phone rings. That's how that's the amount of time they don't want to lapse to get that hot lead. And so having these kind of mentalities for smaller places that can't handle that, I think is an open market. As far as from personal use, I think it'll be also useful. One, make it sound like me, right? That if I'm going to have something written, I want it to sound like it came from me. And I don't always want to have to go back and repolish it a lot. So if I can get it close, that humanizer works great, especially to get around, evidently, your professors. All right? And so I can tell you other ways to get around turning it in, too. So the other part of that is, I think with some of those plugins, what makes sense to the different, this is the hard part about talking about it in general, right? In banking, there might be certain features that make a lot more sense. In trading, might make a lot more sense. Stock evaluations might make a lot more sense compared to software development or sales, right? So I think a lot of it's going to depend on who comes up with the idea and how they actually can get that plugged in, and having the entrepreneur or the business to lead that way. So, all right. All right, well, thank y'all for showing up. Thank y'all for coming. Thanks for the sponsor. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.